All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be with you. And we've got Arlen with us. Arlen, good. I guess whatever time it is where you are, how are you doing today?
Pretty good. It's 12:02 right now on the East Coast, Eastern time, and I'm doing just fine, thank you. How about you?
Well, I was doing well until I started hearing myself. I've been working on trying to resolve the problems. We've had some with Arlen's computer, but now obviously we're on mine as well. There we go. All right, so no more double audio. So Arlen, we've got great topics. We had talked about a bunch of different things to discuss today, but I wanted to follow up on what you had been saying last week, which is Plan B. Do we need to look for an alternative to Biden Harris? And frankly, I was dismissive of your suggestion. I didn't think there was any reason for the Democrats to look to an alternative, mainly because I didn't think that any alternative would do better than Biden in the general election. But I'm not so sure. So that's why we've got a picture of Gavin Newsom there with the words Plan B under his name. Biden behind Nikki Haley by 6 points. This is in a poll that came out after we spoke last week. 73% of Americans are seriously concerned about his mental competence. Let's cut to the chase. Would Gavin Newsom have a better chance of defeating the Republican field?
Uh, he might have a good chance. I saw him being interviewed last night on Face the Nation. Actually, I recorded it and saw it, and he sounded really good. But he seems not interested in running in 2024. But circumstances could change, and then maybe he would be. But he's certainly a very articulate, very strong, very progressive. He would be good. I also did a little Googling and found a number of different candidates who are also could be alternatives besides Newsom. I don't know if you want me to
Well,
tell you
not
some.
yet, not yet.
Okay.
Now, so in the image that I share there, this is for the promotional, our promo for today's program. You can see Newsom, handsome, young. Obviously, that's a staged photo, but he looks like he's tan, rested, and ready to go. I think there are a lot of problems that the Democrats would have to confront if they somehow were able to shove aside Joe Biden. First is Kamala Harris. What do you do with Kamala Harris, Arlen?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. I don't think she's as bad as she's made out to be. I know that the right wing media just attacks her constantly, and maybe it's because she's black and a woman and different ethnic background.
Well, do you
But
think she's defended as aggressively as she is, in part because she's black and a woman? Maybe if she were a white man, she wouldn't even be in the position she's in. I mean, I think that's kind of a little bit unfair. She is a gaffe machine, and her record really wasn't that impressive. Certainly wasn't progressive in California, Arlen, to be
Well,
fair.
I don't know about that. I think she did pretty well in California, and I think she's gets doesn't get enough credit for being as good as she is because, like I say, she's being attacked constantly on all sides, and it's really not fair. Just like the right wing attacks Biden, they attack Harris the same way, thinking that if Biden doesn't make it, then Harris will be the next choice, and they want to, of course, badmouth her. So yeah, but as far as Biden goes, I thought he was doing quite well, but all of a sudden you start looking at these polls, and the people don't seem to think he's too old and he's not competent enough, and you have to look at those polls because you can't take a chance to give the Republicans, full steam ahead. That's not good.
So, who are the other names that you would put up there? And let me just kind of try to, I don't know, force the conversation about Harris, since you don't think she's necessarily problematic or certainly isn't as bad as I would, for example, claim. What about her?
Uh, Harris, you mean?
Yes, exactly.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've got a list of about eight or nine candidates that I think would be really awesome. And, she could be one of them. Everybody names her. But let me give you a few other names. There's, besides Gavin Newsom, there's Pete Buttigieg, very articulate, knows how to speak. Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer is very good, might be a good candidate. Sherrod Brown, the senator from Ohio, I've always liked him. He's very progressive. Stacey Abrams has been mentioned a lot. Let's not forget Elizabeth Warren. She's still there. And Amy Klobuchar, who was very impressive, I think, in the last election, as in the primaries. So, there's a lot of names there. And somebody even mentioned AOC, but I don't think that's going to happen.
So, is it your view that all of them, I mean, I'm trying to get what your final take is. I mean, do you think any or all of them would likely perform better in a general election? And would you urge them, assuming it's not Harris, to take her on as their Veep?
Well, I don't know as their Veep, but I think all of them are good candidates if they get started early, like right now, and start building up their credentials and their exposure, because I think they're all good candidates, very articulate, very good records, but they can't wait too long, is what I'm trying to say. I think Biden has to let them come in, and I don't know if he will or not.
All right, I'm swearing to not argue with you. I'm going to just simply say I don't agree with any of them, as I think they're all terrible candidates.
I know.
That said, I think, I think Dr. West is the best choice by far in this cycle. And I was a little disappointed even with Brianna Joy Gray, who debated, maybe I'll get into that later in the week, but she debated Crystal and Kyle, who erstwhile progressives have both endorsed Biden. I thought she could have been a little stronger at certain points, but that we can debate later. I just don't think any of those Democrats really did impress. I would just say this about in the primaries. None of them got any traction, Arlen, including Harris. The only two candidates who really showed any kind of widespread support in 2020 were Sanders, who's clearly not running. And I wouldn't urge him to. I would not urge Bernie. I think he's too old. And there's some other factors involved. And frankly, Biden, I guess you could say Buttigieg because he did well in Iowa, but he quickly fell off the table. And I think there's some real issues with him as in terms of his work as the transportation secretary, the problems with the supply chain. And also, frankly, his base he doesn't have much of a base. He was the mayor of a small city, well under 100,000 people. And even during the primaries, there was a lot that came out about his mayoral tenure that wasn't real positive. So I get the New York Times endorsed Klobuchar and Elizabeth Warren, but just generated no excitement, Arlen.
Yeah, well, but you're going back 4 years to the primary back then. And I think some of these guys have improved and are better. But the thing about all of them is you can't push the age factor there. They have nothing to worry about regarding age on all those people. So you got to take them as they are. And I think, their policies are good, just like Biden's policies, I think, are good compared to the Republicans. So, I'd love to see somebody like Elizabeth Warren or Amy Klobuchar run, given enough time to build up a base and to build up credentials. I think, I think they would be good choices. Biden, I don't know. I don't know if he could overcome these polls and his age.
I think that Klobuchar and Warren, as I mentioned, I don't think they're great candidates in terms of their political charisma. Let me just use that term. I think that showed in 2020. I do think that Gavin Newsom would be the best bet to replace Biden. I'm not convinced he would. He would, in fact, be a better Democratic nominee, but I think he might well be for a couple of reasons. One, he's not as well. There certainly isn't the negative perception. He has gotten beaten up before, but I think he has demonstrated he is a real political pro. And I think that also being a governor really helps Democrats versus being a senator. There just aren't all those votes that you can go back to that were in the Senate to beat them up for. He's a good looking guy, and I hate to say that matters, but I think it does matter. He's kind of got a little bit of a star quality to him. So for those reasons, I think he might be the best choice. But then I get to this question for you, Arlen. Would this only be possible if Biden himself embraces this and comes out and says flat out, I have served my 4 years, I've served my country, it is now time for me to turn this over to another Democrat, and that Democrat is
that's odd too, because Biden might have no choice but to say, I'm turning it over to my vice president, Kamala Harris, because,
well, she said she's ready. She has flat out said she is ready to go.
Yeah. And again, some people are going to like her, some people won't, but I don't think she's as bad as people say she is. But somebody like Newsom, if you compare him side by side with Trump or DeSantis or one of those other Republicans, he looks pretty darn good. He's a young man. He is handsome. He speaks well. He's progressive. A lot of things going for him. So, but I don't know if he is ready. He seems to say he wants 2028, or at least, he doesn't want to run in 2024, but who knows? Who knows what he really thinks.
So is the problem here, Arlen, ultimately that, and this is kind of the Paul Krugman argument, that it's not that Biden hasn't done a good job. It's not that he isn't a good president. It's that people don't realize it, that he's held, for whatever reason, people aren't happy right now. So it is, but it's not his fault. Or as Krugman says, I'm okay. People are doing fine, according to Paul Krugman, but things are terrible. They blame Joe Biden unfairly, but they do. So Democrats have to accept that reality.
Yeah, that's the problem. He has done a decent job, a good job, and he should be much higher in the polls, but he isn't, because for one thing, he's constantly attacked, by the right wing, so they make him sound like he's incompetent, that he can't do anything at all. But that's really not true. He's really much better than they, make him out to be. But he still can't overcome the age and the possible, if he stumbles or does something that gives the impression that he's too old, then there's going to be problems. So.
All right. Well, I appreciate that. You're watching Halitics with Arlen, and of course, I'm Hal. Click in the bottom right of your screen to subscribe if you haven't already. All I ask of you, I know some hosts ask for money. I will never do that. In fact, if you send me a check, I promise you I will rip it up. Well, unless you're a billionaire, then maybe I won't. But otherwise,
money if they want, I'll accept money.
You can, if you want to send money, send to Arlen. Do not send to me. I absolutely insist. I'm dead serious. The only thing I ask people to do is to click subscribe and click like if you like what we're doing. I just want this channel to reach the biggest possible audience. I think it's really important what we're doing here, trying to have a real dialogue about the issues that confront us in this country, which I think are extraordinarily dire. I think Arlen does too. We have somewhat different solutions, but that's why this program, I think, is special, because I absolutely entertain different views. 240-363, and I forget, what is it? 7120, I believe. That's terrible. I can't even remember. 240, there we go. I'm going to put this up on the screen so you can see it, although it will, we'll do it this way. 240-363-7190. 240-363, yeah, there it is, 363-7190. Arlen, we'll get to Krugman in a second, but I do want to give you a compliment from someone else, okay? Not from me, but let's be clear here.
Oh, of course.
So my mom complimented our program last week and singled you out. She's like, I like Arlen. I don't know if she didn't say I like him more than I like you. I mean, she's my mother. She's not, but I think she agrees with you more. She certainly agrees with your Democrats are much better than Republicans, rather than my Democrats may be slightly less horrible than Republicans take.
I've never met your mother, but I think I'd like to.
Well,
She
Coach
seems
has a lot of the, well, and I wonder if Coach, hey, Coach, if you're watching, check in 240-363-7190 if you're watching live. So there's a nice compliment. She definitely appreciates your contributions. So there, let's get back to this. Krugman, the Nobel Prize winner, I think Pulitzer Prize winner too, perhaps, Nobel Prize in economics. He says the problem for Biden is just what you said. He is not getting credit for his economic management. Is that right?
definitely. There are certainly some good things going on. I mean, the employment picture, there's a lot more jobs. There's inflation is starting to go a little bit down, and he's building, infrastructure. He's lowering the costs of some pharmaceuticals like insulin. So, he's helping a lot of people. He's helping young people with their student debts. And, you could go on and on with a lot of things that he's doing. They're pretty darn good.
Well, I think with regard to the student debt, I'll just say this. I think that he has been making a legitimate effort, but the courts have stymied some of his attempts. And I think you can also, there's also room. Yeah, well, the Republicans for sure, but I think it's more the courts that have simply said his plan is not constitutional. I think you also make an argument, which I'm not going to spend a lot of time with here, that he really hasn't handled the student debt crisis very well. And if he had done things a little differently, we might be in a better, students might be in a better position. But that's for another day. But I will give him, grudging credit that he hasn't completely ignored the crisis, which is very serious for students, very, very, and for student debt or people with student debt. It's very, very serious. A lot of very serious problems that we're confronted with. So basically, though, the argument, as I hear it, is Biden's doing a good job. He's not getting credit for it. The problems really are perception. Americans aren't smart enough or are besotted by media and therefore don't really understand how good things are. This is
and the age factor.
And the age too, for sure. And I think, he does seem to come across as somewhat, he has his senior moments. There's just no question about it. Not like what we saw from Mitch, where he actually just stops and stares, but it does appear that Biden too has his age moments. So
let's not forget. Excuse me, Hal. Let's not forget that he's always had problems with articulating things. He's stuttered when he was young. He messes up words, but that's been going on for years. That's not something that's because he's old. That's just the kind of
that's who he is. That's his one of his character traits. Well, it is unfortunate that articulation isn't more highly revered by American voters, or I might be president there. Just a little brag, little pompous boast. And Arlen, you'd be high up in the administration as well. That argument, though, that seems to be something the Democrats are pushing. I played this last week. Here is Representative Raskin on the Democratic woes. I want to make sure that's not muted.
Plutocrats are not going to save us. Only the Democrats will save us. With all of our flaws and imperfections as a party, and everywhere I go, people lecture me about why we're not messaging as well as we should be messaging and so on. Even with all of that.
Yeah, so he basically, even with all that, we're the great party and the other side sucks. This is message.
Hold on a second. Now I'm starting to like him for a presidential possibility.
Well, he's still recovering from cancer, and he didn't even run for U.S. Senate. But again, the argument is it's not our policies, it's not the way we govern. It's just we don't message well. People don't understand how great we are, and you can say that. I just think it's a losing message. I just don't think that works. I think you have to acknowledge. And I just don't hear the Democrats do it. There's no post-mortem, nothing. If you want to say it's not our fault that things are bad for so many Americans, go ahead and say it. But, here are some recent headlines, and they were as recent as I could get, Arlen. credit card debt, and this is, what's his name? Krugman says what a great job, how great the economy is. Well, a month ago, Americans' credit card debt hit a record $1 trillion. Krugman says Americans are still spending, so we must not be that anxious about the economy, at least with respect to ourselves. We're spending money we don't have. And one of the big reasons he says, and you mentioned this too, inflation is down. It is true. But rents continue to rise. This was the most recent I could find. Across the U.S., we had seen record increases in rents last summer. They're not as bad now. It is true. I want to be as honest as I can possibly be here. But for so many Americans, they're still, their debt goes up every friggin' month. So I think it's the wrong argument to say to people, oh, things are really good. You just don't get it. Because for so many Americans, they just aren't good.
Well, that is true. It's bad for a lot of people, but there's also, like I say, there's a lot of positive things that Biden has done to keep the economy going. I mean, people thought it would be crashing by now, and he's done a pretty good job. And you have to ask yourself, what would the Republicans do differently? That's another strange thing about all of this is that, Republicans shouldn't have any good favorability rating because, their main man, Donald Trump, has been, he's got 91 felony charges. I mean, it doesn't make any sense that they're where they are now. And actually, and the fact that Joe Biden, is down as far as he is. In comparison, I just think the Democrats are way, way better, and the polls don't necessarily show that.
I think what the polls reflect, Arlen, and I think what you're saying reflects this too, is how there really has developed two different Americas. And I do think that there's an America that really has lost an awful lot of hope and views the future with great fear and trepidation and doesn't believe that government is on their side. So when someone like a Donald Trump talks in almost, in some ways very, very apocalyptic terms and wants to blow things up and, drain the swamp and all that, that is very appealing for those people. Now, I'm not saying that they're totally right about their views, but that's the vibe they get, the feeling that things just have spun out of control and that they work harder and harder for less and less. And I think it's not a completely inaccurate perception. Also, yes, some health care costs may come under control, but the hope that the Affordable Care Act would somehow reduce healthcare anxiety has not proven true. It just didn't happen. The hope that they would be able to get the kind of education that might allow them to really participate in the information economy has led many millions of Americans into onerous debt that they don't hope they can ever escape.
I heard one theory, Hal, that, things are bad for a lot of people, especially in the red states, and they've lost confidence in the institutions. They don't think the political parties can help. They don't think anybody can help. But I think when they look at Donald Trump, they think of somebody that says basically, fuck you, everybody, fuck you, all you elites and all you, institutions that aren't doing the job for me. So it's a way of attacking the rest of the country, and he's just coming across as, I don't know, somebody.
Well, I mean, it doesn't that not seem legitimate to you? I mean, plausible that explains why somebody that, for you, given your circumstances, which are, you're not a rich person as far as I know, as well as I know you, but you're relatively comfortable. You enjoy security that so many don't, and that they haven't gotten it regardless of whether it's a Democrat or Republican in power.
Yeah, well, that is true. These conditions are bad, and they're not going to be easily fixed. And a lot of people are struggling. And there's a lot of people that don't have enough food. They don't have homes. These kind of things should be addressed by a country as rich as ours, but they're not. So you got to blame somebody. And I think both parties are being blamed. Actually, nobody really likes
agreed. I totally agree with that. They're both being blamed, and one of the appeals that Trump has is that he goes after Republicans too. He doesn't mince words. He,
Right.
little Marco and low energy Jeb and all that. I mean, he doesn't hold back criticizing Republicans. Now, I'm not in any way defending Trump. I'm trying to explain his appeal. I think the Democrats don't, in general. Why support Dr. West, even though I accept the argument that on balance, I don't think Biden is as bad, and I do think some of his policies have, or his actions have, he's at least really made an effort to, on the margins, improve people's lives. I just don't think they're up. They reach, they meet the challenge. They don't meet the challenge the way FDR's New Deal did meet the challenge of the Great Depression.
Of course, there is, one thing that you have to realize, that the Republicans pretty much own half the government. Also, they have the House of Representatives. They almost have the Senate, and they're pretty. They're going to block everything that Biden wants. Anything that goes beyond the little, nibbling around the edges, they're going to block. So, he can't give people what they really need, which is, universal health care and all those other things. So he's kind of in a bad position in that way.
All right, we are going to move on to the next election. Arlen, I appreciate that. By the way, 240-363-7190. If you chat, I am looking at the chat right now. I don't see any chat. I will try to get your comment in. I know I missed one last week. I try not to. Let's get to another election, Arlen, back to California Senate race, which we also did discuss last week. And there's some news, which is why I want to get to this, because I was kind of curious. This really went to the Gavin Newsom, actually. That's really why I thought this was interesting, because Gavin Newsom made some news, and we are talking about alternatives to Biden. There's also the discussion in this race with the senator to the left, U.S. Senator Feinstein. Is there an alternative we have to look to now to replace her? Because she does seem pretty demented at this point, in her late 80s or perhaps 90. I'd never looked up her age. The three main challengers for what will be a vacant seat next year are Rep. Barbara Lee. These are all Congress members, Representative Katie Porter and Representative Adam Schiff. So what kind of drew the conversation to this for me, Arlen? Well, first of all, was this poll. I think I showed you the poll before where the former U.S. Senator Nikki Haley from South Carolina was up by 6. Probably that's inaccurate, but as close as they could get. Here's California as of Thursday, according to the LA Times. Schiff at 20, Porter at 17, Lee at 7. Barbara Lee can't be happy looking at those numbers, Arlen. And she tweeted out in response, and I'm going on, I'm trying to set the table here. Gavin Newsom said, I'm not going to replace Feinstein if I can possibly avoid it. And if I do replace her, because she's not fit to be the senator anymore, it won't be with Barbara Lee. And what kind of, I guess, what had driven conversation that it might be Barbara Lee is that the governor had said if he does replace a senator, the last replacement was with Alex Padilla. That was of, who was that he replaced, Arlen? Wasn't Barbara Boxer? It wasn't Boxer, was it Boxer that he replaced with Padilla?
Yeah, Boxer, right.
So now Padilla has been elected U.S. Senator. He's not going to replace, if you're appointed to the position, you have a great advantage. He said he was going to appoint a black woman, Barbara Lee was someone that people considered, but he's not going to pick Barbara Lee. If he picks anyone, because she's running, he doesn't want to put his thumb on the scale. So first, let me ask you this. How do you react to that statement by Gavin Newsom that if I replace anyone, and I'm going to try not to replace anyone because I want Feinstein to serve out her term, but if I replace anyone, it won't be with anyone, it won't be Barbara Lee. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's really a problem when these politicians, those in power, say, I think the next person should be, or I'm going to appoint this kind of person. I mean, Joe Biden did the same thing. He promised a woman, and so we have Kamala Harris. And for Newsom to say, "Oh, I want a black woman," and not consider Barbara Lee, he should never have made that promise in the first place. But I think any of those three would be okay with me. I don't, they're all better than Feinstein, I think. Preferably Katie Porter and Barbara Lee. They're more progressive than Schiff. But I think even with Schiff in there, I think we'd be better off.
So would you object, though, and I think you're saying you're not, but I just want to clarify, you would not object then to Gavin Newsom replacing Feinstein at this moment? And I believe he has the power under the Constitution because he could declare her incompetent. So you would say you would recommend that Newsom replace Feinstein with any of those three?
Certainly. I think that would be a great thing. Feinstein just doesn't do anything right now, and her mind is pretty much gone. So she's not of any help to anybody. But any of those three, I think, could come in here and do something.
So what do you say to the governor's response that I don't want to put my thumb on the scale? Whomever I select will have the inside track to being elected next year. That's for the voters to decide, not for me.
Yeah, well, he doesn't want to make that commitment and then get stuck with it if something goes wrong. So I think he just, wants to let the voters decide, and so he won't be blamed for it.
And you disagree with that? You think he should have the guts to choose whoever he thinks is best?
At this point, yes, just because of the condition that Feinstein is in, and she's worthless right now. She doesn't do anybody any good on the Democratic side. So, yeah, if one of those three could get in there, they could start doing things.
What about the statement by the governor that he would pick someone if he has to, and I think he should, and I think he does have to, but it wouldn't be any of those three? Like maybe he could pick, let me just throw this name out there, Bill Monty.
Well, I don't know. I think all three of those that we have now for the top candidates they're all good. So I don't see any problem with nominating any of those. So when you start,
well, I would say not that any of them aren't good, although I do think Adam Schiff is not good. But the argument I think the governor is making is I don't want to substitute my judgment for the voters. Yeah. And so if he picked a Bill Monning or I don't know, a retired politician who has a lot of respect across the board in the state, a John Laird, someone of that ilk, that would address the concern he has, which is I don't want to choose for the people of the state.
Well, whoever he picks is going to have an instant advantage. I mean, they'll go up in the polls and they'll have a better chance. But I don't see why we need to go to somebody else like that that's unknown. Newsom just doesn't want to make any kind of commitment and put himself where he's going to regret it later. So, yeah, like I say, he wants the voters to decide, and that's okay with me. But I just wish it would happen sooner.
So here's what Barbara Lee has to say, and then we can move on to immigration, which is another issue, Arlen, just to circle back, that is very much hard, I believe, a problem. It's an albatross around the neck of the Democratic Party at this moment.
Right, that's true.
So we'll get to that, but it's, for whatever reason, it is not harming their status in the Golden State, where there's basically a one-party rule. Although probably in the inland, right, in the inner empire and cities like Fresno, Bakersfield, and the like, immigration is hurting them more than it is in the big cities, even though obviously LA, San Francisco, and San Jose and San Diego do have problems due to the massive influx of immigration as well. So what do you think about what Barbara Lee had to say? Can you read that? I think you should be able to on the screen.
Yes, I can read it. She says, I'm troubled by the governor's remarks, right? The idea that a black woman should be appointed only as a caretaker to simply check a box is insulting to countless black women across the country who have carried the Democratic Party to victory election after election. Well, she should be happy that she is a black woman and she could be eligible.
Well, no, but he said that a caretaker, meaning it'll be someone who isn't running. So I would appoint an African-American woman who isn't running for senator. So I'm not helping. Like, I'm not able to just name a well-known African-American woman in she's busy running San Francisco, but okay, London Breed. Let's say he put London Breed in that position. She would be a caretaker until the election. But if you put Barbara Lee, she wouldn't be a caretaker because she could win and she could be elected, and then she would stay in the seat.
I just thought of another name that would be ideal for that kind of a job, and that would be Nancy Pelosi. I mean, she's not going to be running.
She is. She just announced she's running for re-election.
Yeah, she's going to be in the House of Representatives, but she could actually be a temporary senator, and no one would expect her to run for Senate again.
No, but I think she couldn't be a senator. I believe the rules wouldn't allow her to serve as an acting U.S. senator and as the representative from San Francisco.
You could give up her seat in the House and go over to the Senate. I mean, she's, her future is limited.
I doubt she would do that, but she's also not a black woman, and Newsom said he was going to pick a black woman, so that's why I threw out the name London Breed. But she is seated. But what the point is here, that Newsom isn't going to appoint anyone who's running for office. Whoever he appoints would be a caretaker until the election. And that's why he's not selecting Barbara Lee.
Sure. And, he made the commitment to a certain kind of a person, which is stupid. You shouldn't make those kind of promises. But he did. And he's kind of stuck in a tough position if he doesn't want any of those three that are most likely to be senator.
Well, some have said Maxine Waters. She's quite elderly at this point, too, I believe. I'm not quite sure how old she is, but she's certainly been in this House for many, many years. And she looks to me to be somewhat elderly. So I'm not quite sure how old she is, but that name was floated out there as well. So that would check the box. I get where Lee's coming from. I mean, at this point, I think you should nominate, it's really tough because I get why he doesn't want to. I think you and I disagree on this a little, Arlen. I think his judgment, I don't want to select the next member of the Senate, makes sense. And I also get your point, which is that he doesn't want to pick somebody who might lose. I get to last comment about the race, and I want to just look at this poll one more time because I have a thought on who I think this poll who should be happiest about this particular poll. Let me post it again, Arlen. Who do you think, let me ask you, who do you think would look at these results and be the most happy at this point?
I would guess you're thinking of Katie Porter. And, she's very close to Schiff, and Schiff has a lot of built-in advantages. He's got a lot of money. He's on the media a lot. Porter, you don't see as much, but she's still right up there neck and neck with Schiff. So I would think she should be happy.
I'm with you 100% on that. Remember, with the top two primary, if you have two who have a significant lead, as in this case, where Porter has more than twice as many as Barbara Lee and other followers behind her, it would seem clear to me that at this point, you're going to have a top two between Schiff and Porter. And I got to believe that Barbara Lee's voters are going to pretty much, with very, very high percentage, will line up behind Katie Porter. Barbara Lee's the most progressive of those three. Porter's just to her right and then shift further right over. So it's hard for me to believe that the Lee voters will endorse anyone or will come to anyone but Porter. Also, they're both women, so those who want a woman senator to replace Feinstein, bearing in mind that Padilla is a male, I think Porter right now has got to be pretty darn pleased.
Well, yeah, and she's a very good candidate, I think. Every time I've seen her, she looks good. She speaks well. She's smart. I haven't seen anything that I would not like about her. So I think she would be a very good choice. And I think you're not giving any credit to Steve Garvey. I saw him on the list.
I don't know who that is, so you'll have to explain.
That's
the baseball player, the former first baseman for the L.A. Dodgers. Now, I knew he was. Is he a Republican?
I'm sure that's probably not Steve Garvey. I'm just joking. So
okay.
Although he did seem conservative when he was.
I think it could be Steve Garvey. Look it up. I'm not going to look up while we're doing a program, but we'll look it up. So let's get to the final topic for today. I just always tease people about other discussions. I was really fascinated by some work that the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute did, where they came to a conclusion that has been widely accepted with regard to the origins of life on this planet. Virtually every species descending from what they call sisters. One sister basically became not sponges, but became, what was it, Arlen? What was the other? Oh, some sort of jelly, pod jellies, or some sort of very, very primitive jellyfish. And the other sister became everything. So you and I are descended from a jellyfish's sister, bottom line, Arlen, as are, horses, mosquitoes, it doesn't matter. I was fascinated by that, this origin of animal life. Now, we all life, including, I think, plants, come from probably one common ancestor, even beyond that, but the article didn't touch on it. But I was very fascinated by that, Arlen.
That was very interesting. And by the way, you shouldn't say jellyfish because they're not fish. So you got to say jelly.
The jelly. Okay, I'm sorry. That is correct. They're certainly not fish. They don't have gills, and they have those. They don't have a spine, right? Fish have backbone, so it's clearly not a fish.
And I can assure you that the religious right wouldn't like any of this stuff because they think that God invented everybody on one day. But
But isn't this just as amazing? Isn't this, it's almost more, to me, miraculous that we can evolve to such a massive, such a complex web of life can evolve.
And then you have Donald Trump and you wonder, have we really evolved?
All right. Well, we'll move on. But that's as fascinating as it's also incredibly depressing because, of course, humans are behind the sixth great extinction. But in the end, even when it's over, the extinction, life will continue. It will be.
Yeah, it's amazing that
continue.
They have figured out that this might be, the very origins of life. I mean, that's amazing what scientists can figure out these days.
I think it's a huge coup too. I really want to give shout out to the Monterey Bay Aquarium, its institute, and that very young scientist, 30 years old, who wrote the paper that seems to be widely accepted now. It's very hard to get scientists or anybody to agree on anything, but there's quite a dispute. Was it jellies? Was it sponges that were the sisters, right? Because the two jellies and one became jellies and the other became everything. Some argued it was sponges, but now even the supporters of the sponge theory seem to have acknowledged, no, they're the DNA sequencing has convinced us that we are all sisters to jellies. All right, let's get to the final topic, Arlen. This was I believe your choice, although I was very much behind it. The immigration crisis. What is the hook here to discuss this serious problem we're facing?
Yeah, this was an article, an op-ed by Michael Bloomberg about the various ways that Congress and the president should be, doing something about immigration, which is true. No one's really come up with a good idea that works, because we're still having the problem of people coming over our borders in record numbers. And, I haven't heard any, good responses to that, good answers. But, Bloomberg makes some good points, and over some of them.
Yeah, I thought he did too, Arlen. Let me see if we can get to those right now. I agree with you. No one's come up with a good solution, but I again think this kind of demonstrates why Trump has appeal. And I'm not saying I agree with building a wall. It's a terrible solution, quote, in quote, solution, the wrong thing to do. But he is proposing, he did insist on a very big, bold response. And so many were, I guess, intrigued and even found that appealing.
That is true, but Mexico hasn't volunteered to pay for it, so that's a problem.
Apparently, we're still building parts of it too. Biden didn't just shut down the construction, which I think he had the ability to do. So one thing that jumped out at me, and I thought this was fair, of Bloomberg talking about his successor, his second successor, obviously. De Blasio followed him in office as mayor of New York, but now Eric Adams, former police officer, is the mayor. I thought he had been the commissioner. He was not the commissioner of police. And Bloomberg defending Adams for saying that the crisis will destroy the city. Obviously, Adams very concerned with the massive financial challenges that housing all immigrants poses. And he's recognizing that. I also don't think, to be fair to Adams, while the New York Times may not like that statement, my guess is that a lot of people in Queens, Brooklyn, and Staten Island will find it pretty again, appealing, like Trump's build a wall.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of burden on certain sections of our country, certain cities, those cities near the border. And, the federal government has to step up and help them. But one of the interesting things I see is that Bloomberg talks about is that people who come into our country have to wait a whole year before they can work, which makes no sense at all. How are they going to live in the meantime? How are they going to have rent and food and everything else? I mean, that makes no sense. So there's a lot of little things that can be done to improve the situation.
Yeah, I was immediately seized by that statement as well. I was unaware, and of course I believe Bloomberg when he says it, that if you have a visa allowing you in the country, you are not allowed to work for a year. That's crazy. That makes no sense. I also think it's completely ignored. I don't believe for a second that folks who come into this country are waiting. My wife is a public school teacher, and she spends a lot of time with children. She teaches children she teaches immigrants. I don't want to say they're children of immigrants. They are immigrants. She teaches them, and their parents are often, working 2 or 3 jobs. When they call, they come to school. If they need to reach the parent, they have all these different numbers to call, or if not numbers, they have the cell number of the parent, obviously. But then the parents are often at work. It takes them time to get to the kid if the kid needs to be supported. So it seems to me pretty obvious, Arlen, that whatever the law is, people come into this country, they're working.
Yeah, and they're going to often go, underground. They're going to look for, jobs that are under the table. They get money under the table, and it's just a bad situation. And that's one thing that should be worked on. And Bloomberg gives some other things that should be worked in. Give let's see, those who wait their turn for a visa should be respected. I mean, they allow people to go in who haven't been there as long as other people. That's one thing. And the Congress should provide the resources to ensure that asylum claims could be resolved quickly. It just takes forever for a lot of these asylum claims to get resolved. You know, they take a year or more, and that just clogs up the whole system.
Yeah, I was also, and let me see if we can get those on screen real quick because I think visual aids are always useful. So here we go. Here we go. So you talked about both of these. I think Arlen, fair. Those who wait their turn for a visa should be respected, and that, you know, people who get into the country ultimately legally should be prioritized by the system. I'm not sure how they're not. I mean, if you are in the country illegally, you're subject to being deported. So I'm not sure how that plays out. But also, no question that these asylum claims take way too long to resolve, and people, you know, are left in a limbo.
There's another thing about those asylum claims. A lot of them are, you know, because of just people that want to be able to make money to live. But there's also what it's really intended for is people who've been persecuted in their own country, or, you know, or being in danger of being, you know, killed by gangs and all that kind of thing. And they should be the number one priority. And those who are just looking for a better job and more money should maybe not be on the top of the list.
Yeah, he talks about that. Let me see if I can find that. But before I do, Arlen, I was somewhat not really persuaded by that argument because, you know, if you're desperate enough to come here, you're desperate enough to come here, right? I mean, if it's that bad in your country where you're starving to death, or you can't even leave your house without, or let your kid leave the house without fear that they're going to get shot. I mean, those are pretty good reasons to come to this country, A, and B, you know, the U.S. is to blame for a lot of the violence in those. We have to take ownership. We have to take responsibility for creating such horrible conditions in these countries that, you know, there's mass emigration therefrom.
Yeah, it seems like so many people want to come into this country because of how bad their countries are, and we should be helping their countries. But, you know, we're not doing enough, obviously.
Well, not only that should we be helping them, I mean, we should just stop causing the problems that we've created it, whether it's our drug laws, whether it's dumping cheap, below market cost grains into their countries, destroying their agricultural industry, whether it's, allowing easy distribution of guns into those countries. You know, all of those are major factors that are driving this problem. And again, Bloomberg does touch on all of this, and I give him credit. I think it was a pretty darn fair assessment of where we are. What I have a problem with in this article, and he acknowledges it, so I think he does a great job laying out the issue, Arlen. Here's where I have a problem with it. I'm not sure he really gives us a solution. Did you feel, I mean, I don't, and I'm just not sure what he's suggesting, and I'm not, that's fine. But I don't have an answer that I read this and I have an answer to the problem.
Well, I don't think there is one answer. I think Bloomberg touched on a lot of things and that we're not addressing, and we should be. I mean, there's, all the people that want to get into this country probably have great reasons, and they all should be able to come into this country, except for the fact that we can't take that many people. It's a problem. So we have to, touch on all these different issues and come up with better solutions than we have right now.
All right. And again, we started the conversation here about immigration, just focusing a little bit on what Mayor Adams of New York had said about how the crisis could destroy the city. And Bloomberg doesn't just pay lip service to that. He points out that local governments are incredibly burdened by the problem, and that is not right. And I think he's correct. Again, he is correct there.
Yeah. Another thing that he touches on, and it's true that the Democratic Party is going to get blamed the most. And that's going to hurt. That could hurt them in the next election. So, they really have to address these things and see if we could, get some solutions started.
Well, this goes to the issue we started with, Arlen, and maybe that's fine. We can circle back. I don't generally find persuasive the claim that the problem the Democrats face is messaging and they're doing everything right. But it does, and they're not doing nothing. I mean, Biden's deported as many people as Trump. Obama deported more people than Trump did. So, and he is separating families as well. I hate those policies. I think they're awful. But this is a situation where what the Republicans did not make things better. And yet, because they message very, very strongly, very aggressively, and the Democrats have completely failed to come up with any way to talk about this issue, it's hurting the Democrats badly.
Yeah, it is. And the Republicans will say, the Democrats want all the borders to be open, which is not true. And, so he's being, the Republicans are being really unfair because they don't really have
come on, Arlen. You can't, political parties are not fair to their opponents. I mean, that just doesn't happen.
I didn't realize that, but okay, I'll accept that.
They have to do the Democrats need to come up with a message, but they also have to come up with a policy. Let's face it, they don't have a policy either. So they're messaging badly, and they're losing to the Republicans because their policies are as bad as the Republicans, but the Republicans have a message, an ugly one I don't like, but one that seems to have a lot of appeal. The point I would make is the Democrats need to come up with a policy that should be somewhat like what Bloomberg discuss. I'll give you another thing that that is wrong with our policies. We don't provide a path to citizenship, and we also are requiring. I mean, we load these people with huge debt, which makes their lives much more challenging. There's so many things we do wrong when it comes to immigration. Again, and I think it gets to my final point, and I'll give you the final word because we're just at the end of the show. This is why I find, and I think many others do, Dr. West's candidacy so appealing, why I'm going to vote for him. Because we're facing massive problems, and neither party, you can argue the Republicans make them worse than the Democrats. I would argue neither party is up to the challenge of these often existential threats we're facing. And indeed, the new Holocaust, the climate cataclysm, is an existential threat.
That certainly is. You're right. So, I mean, what the Democrats, I think, would be wise to look at Bloomberg's solutions and start, doing them one by one, and at least have a policy that makes sense. But I don't know if they haven't at least articulated such a policy.
No. And is that your final word, Arlen? I'm going to give you one more opportunity to have a final word, although I will start the music in a couple of seconds. You'll hear it. But anything you want to say further, I hope you will be back Monday. I'm going to be giving the rest of the week. I'll be on tomorrow and Wednesday. Wednesday with Carlos. He's returning. Carlos is great, too. And then I'm off Thursday, Friday, going to New York to see the Elizabeth's Radical Agenda, which I'm looking forward to. All right, final words, Arlen. Anything else?
My final word is I do not support Cornel West because he has no chance of winning. But, there's a lot of other candidates I think do. And, we've mentioned some of them earlier, Elizabeth Warren, Amy Klobuchar, and so on. So anyway, that's my final word.
I'll be back tomorrow. Arlen will be back in a week. Thank you all for being part of Halitics. Call in, text, chat, click like, click subscribe, and tune in tomorrow.